I think we're going to see. Hello, Vassy. Good morning, and thanks for coming in with us a little bit earlier. Share this with me. We're looking now at the man who is going to take over the portfolio vacated by Jody Wilson-Raybould. Here is Lawrence Mcauley, longtime cabinet minister, MP from PEI. Vassy, what are your thoughts on his taking over this role?
Yeah, not necessarily a huge surprise. A lot of Veterans Affairs issues and offices centered in Eastern Canada. I guess a surprise that it's happening now, this soon, in the middle of everything that's going on right now. I had kind of thought that perhaps Minister Sajjan, the defense minister, who on an interim basis had taken over Veterans Affairs, might even sustain that portfolio in the coming months towards, we're 6 months out essentially from an election. So I'm a bit surprised, but at the same time, it is a big file. It is a significant file. It is one that in past elections has proven very tenuous for any government, really. And so not surprising that they would want someone solely devoted to that file.
And yet, interestingly, Vassy, if you were listening earlier, we're just keeping an eye on this vehicle as well. This will be the third. We saw Marie-Claude Monsef arrive earlier, and here we have Marie-Claude Bibeau, presently Minister for International Development. She moves into the portfolio of agriculture, Vassy.
She does, yes. And interesting, you were touching on it with Janice a little earlier, the idea that there's so many agricultural issues at play in Quebec right now, specifically around dairy farmers. They're still waiting, for example, for compensation from CEDA and from the new NAFTA. They don't know how much compensation they're going to get. The government has promised it. A lot of electoral issues where dairy farmers are concerned. And interesting that they would pick someone, perhaps at least to send a signal to them about the priority that they'll be in the next election.
I want to play back, as we were taking a look as she arrived as well, the third of the three ministers involved in the shuffle today, and that is Marie-Claude Monsef. She does take on a dual capacity, Vassy. If we can look at those pictures as well. She was there's inside where we will watch the swearing in, and there is Janice McGregor, who is in position. But we did have an image earlier of Marie-Claude Monsef as she arrived. I'm not sure we'll be able to get that for you, but we'll show that. And she takes on not just international development, moving into the role of Marie-Claude Bibeau, but also retains her title as Minister of Status of Women. There is Lawrence Mcauley. And again, we're keeping watch on all of these camera positions inside now Rideau Hall. But the dual role for Marie-Claude Monsef, she is someone certainly the Prime Minister has championed throughout.
Yeah, to a certain degree. She was first Minister, of Democratic Institutions, and then she too was shuffled out to Status of Women Minister. And at the time, it was viewed, characterized similar actually to the way Jody Wilson-Raybould was shifted out as a demotion. And so it was a smaller portfolio. Not to say anything about the portfolio, but in general, if you look at the ranking of them, it is on the lower end. So this is a signal that I think trying to say that as a government, as a cabinet, they're trusting her with more, with a bigger portfolio, but also about the portfolio specifically, that the idea of international development, we've heard about this feminist-driven agenda, and that the two sort of align and line up with what the government has been trying, and I use the word trying very specifically, to get across with their sort of the way they run their government, their priority on gender equality, that kind of thing.
All right, I want to talk broadly, obviously, about the context when all of this is happening. But I was in the middle of a question to you about Lawrence Mcauley, so let me go back to that. Despite his long record and service in cabinet, we are hearing already from veterans advocates, including people who've been on your program before. They were very much hoping for a veteran in that capacity, given the number of veterans, 600,000 in the country, the size of the budget, and the enormity, really, of the concerns before them. They feel like they haven't had stability. They feel like they haven't had leadership. They've had 6 ministers in just a matter of weeks. Sorry, 4 ministers over the span of just 6 weeks. So it's extraordinary turnover for them. And the reaction immediately to word of this breaking of Lawrence Mcauley in this portfolio, again, they feel like they're not being heard. And I'm wondering just what of a challenge that he faces in taking this on.
It's a huge challenge. And I think that you're absolutely right to point out the kind of turnover that this file has seen. And I know that you, like me, have talked to so many veterans over the years who are beyond frustrated with the pace at which things move in Veterans Affairs. The complaints around receiving benefits on time or not receiving them all or at all, or having to go through massive amounts of paperwork. I mean, that was actually a central election promise in 2015 of the Liberal government to improve upon those functions, to improve the experience for those who are, leaving life in the military and transitioning to civilian life. There's a mixed sort of reaction on whether or not that's happened, but there are certainly so many veterans who feel like it hasn't, and this kind of turnover does nothing to help them feel any differently. And I think on the point of whether or not they appoint a veteran to the file, there's also been a it hasn't always worked out just because there's a veteran presiding over the file. There had been speculation if someone were to take over this, it might be Kieran McCrimmon.
Or Andrew Leslie, perhaps.
Or Andrew Leslie, both of whom are veterans and decorated veterans in the Liberal caucus. But obviously, and we'll hear what new Veterans Affairs Minister Mcauley has to say about that after the swearing-in ceremony. But I certainly agree that will be a question for him.
And I have a question. This is based on what Peter MacKay was telling me just moments ago, and you were listening into that. He raised the issue of surprise that Lawrence Mcauley had signed on to run for re-election in the fall, given that he's already served 9 terms as MP for Cardigan. I said I didn't know that we'd heard that commitment. Maybe this is a short-term posting or short-term in this role. I mean, has he committed to running for re-election?
I think so. Okay. I should double-check that.
There's so many.
John Oliver is not.
Exactly.
I know that,
We've seen so many decide not to run. So I wasn't sure if that was something that was a long-term commitment on his part, or whether it's something that is just to take us through up until the election in the fall.
I know there had been a ton of speculation about whether or not he was running, though, because of the longevity of his time. Yes, I think I see something dated December 17th, 2018, saying that the Agriculture Minister is running for re-election for the 10th time.
Okay,
so
thank you for that point. Vassy, can you just stand by for me? I want to go back outside to your colleague, Janice McGregor, who was there and watching those 3 cars pull in, and the 3 ministers, all presently ministers, about to take on new cabinet responsibilities. Did they say anything? There was a fist pump from Lawrence Mcauley, we think we saw there live. Janice, did they say anything or indicate anything to you as they were going in?
No, I mean, upbeat for sure. Particularly Mr. Mcauley seemed quite enthusiastic on his way in. A new responsibility for him, obviously. He'd been in agriculture for quite some time, perhaps relishing the chance to kind of take on a different file after a long stretch in that previous department. Bibo kind of just sort of smiling, lips sealed. Not a lot to say about her new gig, and Monsef neither. So we don't kind of have any newsy clips for you, other than all of them, trying to put a positive face on their way in. Yes.
To come, we see the podium and a microphone set up. Now, we were mentioning earlier, you and I, that according to our colleague Katie Simpson, the Prime Minister will not take reporter questions at that microphone. So that will be for the 3 ministers. Do we understand?
That's right. So just so everybody understands kind of the procedure here, we're told all 3 ministers are going to come out at the same time. So we're going to have a group availability, a group little press conference here. But at other cabinet shuffles, as you say, the Prime Minister has come out and sort of tried to put a bigger narrative to the changes he made to his ministry, and then there'd be a pause and we'd get some key ministers one by one. This time, just the 3 faces who are taking on new roles here are going to come out, field some questions. An official here saying they want to help us out, get us out of here quicker this time, perhaps in light of the weather.
The weather, I did note in your tweet you were hoping...
that's what to expect.
You were hoping for the next, whenever it is, cabinet shuffle to occur in spring or summer, or at least early fall, because...
If there's any ministers out there thinking of leaving, can you just wait till the snow melts, wait till it gets a bit warmer?
All right,
it's
Janice,
not about me, I know.
Thank you so much. Stand by, if you will, there with me, Janice McGregor, as she is outside. There is the view inside where this cabinet swearing-in will take place, inside Rideau Hall, and as you can see, fewer chairs than normal because it is a much smaller cabinet shuffle, a mini shuffle. And if you're just joining us at 20 to 10 Eastern Time, here is the overview of who's moving. On the left, Lawrence Mcauley, right now Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food, and he represents Cardigan in PEI. He is moving into the role of Minister of Veterans Affairs and will replace Jody Wilson-Raybould, who resigned from Cabinet. In the middle, we have Marie-Claude Bibeau, Minister of International Development, about to take on the role of Minister of Agriculture. And then on the right, Maryam Monsef, who is presently Minister for the Status of Women. She's going to hold that title and also add the portfolio as Minister of International Development. And as we go back to Ottawa, and Vassy Kapelos, who's host of Power and Politics and has been doing just extraordinary work over these days, 20 to 10, and at 10 o'clock, Vassy's going to take over. But let's spend some time together, if we could, Vassy. Where we are now, the context of this cabinet shuffle, where does the story stand, to your eye, on this day?
Well, I think we're still right in the middle of the story. I think that this will provide a few hours of turning the page for the Liberals, because we'll be talking about who these new ministers are, but essentially it doesn't change the situation that they're in, and that is that we've just heard extraordinary testimony from a reputable, seemingly credible to a lot of Canadians, former Justice Minister for this government that has accused senior people, the people who operate the government at the highest level, of acting in an inappropriate way in the context of her role as Attorney General. And we heard that testimony a few days ago, and we're going to hear even more testimony next week that will likely offer a rebuttal from the government's perspective. We'll hear from Jerry Butts, who, of course, is the former principal secretary to the Prime Minister, who resigned in the midst of this controversy. He asked to appear before the Justice Committee, and they have now invited him. We're anticipating that testimony could begin on Wednesday. We're also expecting to hear from Michael Warnock, the clerk of the Privy Council. Again, we've heard from him once. We expect now the Justice Committee has invited him to speak before them again. I'm also interested to see if he'll be at this ceremony, in fact, because so much interest in what his role is.
Yes.
If his comments were within the realm of something that a public servant of his level should be saying. Lots of debate and discussion around that. And then we'll also hear again from the Deputy Minister of the Justice Department. So all of that ahead. Mm-hmm. Still a lot of calls from the opposition to hear from more people, because Jody Wilson-Raybould talked about a number of people that that were involved in those types of conversations that she deemed inappropriate. For example, even her chief of staff, who felt pressure from allegedly from Katie Telford and Jerry Butts, and that chief of staff is not on the witness list for the committee next week. So, as much as, there might be some hope that this cabinet shuffle will turn a new page and move people along, I'd find it hard to believe that it would when you see all that kind of testimony still anticipated next week.
On the Michael Warnock point, I mean, everyone juxtaposed his testimony with Jody Wilson-Raybould's. They were starkly different in interpreting pressure and the question of inappropriate pressure, and so many people, as you say, suggesting that he come back, and indeed we will hear. But I'm wondering, when we heard Jody Wilson-Raybould's testimony, and particularly that question where she was asked directly by a fellow Liberal MP about whether she still had confidence in the Prime Minister, and she did not answer that straightforwardly, strongly, yes. That has many people wondering whether she can stay on in caucus. And many people are very much concerned about the division. As we continue to talk about this, we're going to see some images of the Prime Minister arriving to be part of this shuffle. But you heard him say that he's reviewing her testimony and he has not decided on what to do. What an extraordinary, difficult situation he is in terms of dealing with Jody Wilson-Raybould.
Yeah, arguably one that the government put themselves in. It depends what way you look at it. I think, two things to take from that. It was interesting that he said he needed to review the totality of her testimony before deciding whether or not to keep her in caucus. But at the same time, he said he completely disagrees with her testimony. It was a little difficult to understand how you can arrive at that conclusion if you haven't listened to because the details of her testemony kind of were a bit of were an eye-opener, right? That was not a lot of things that we had that we had not yet heard. But you're absolutely right in that this position, she was almost daring the government and the Prime Minister specifically to kick her out of caucus, and that's a bit of my own interpretation. But
well,
just
on
the
your
way
own
that
program, didn't Kathleen was saying, it's a game of chicken, kick me out, and we're watching the Prime Minister arrive.
She said, there he is. She said, I don't think that anyone's going to kick me out of caucus. But you're absolutely right. I mean, that question of whether or not you have confidence in the Prime Minister, it's kind of understandable that you would need that in order to remain in caucus. And in fact, we had a minister on, Minister Qualtrough, last night who said that's her line for her. You know, if you don't have confidence in the Prime Minister, then why would you want to be in the Liberal caucus? And I think that's a fair question for Jody Wilson-Raybould.
Again, watching pictures from just moments ago as the Prime Minister arrived at Rideau Hall. His three ministers, Lawrence Mcauley, Marie-Claude Bibeau, and Mariam Monsef, already inside. And we are 15 minutes now away from the beginning of this cabinet shuffle. As David Cochrane first reported, a mini shuffle, only existing ministers just switching around, and in Mariam Monsef's case, adding the portfolio of international development to her role as the Minister for the Status of Women. And Vassy Kapelos, who's the host of Power and Politics and about to start a special edition of that program as the shuffle carries on, with me leading up to this. Vassy, a couple of things I was reading this morning that I'd like to talk to you about, and I'm sure we read the same things on this point. Susan Delacourt in the Toronto Star talking about Liberals to whom she is speaking and asking them the question of how rattled they are given the apparent disunity within caucus, but also, of course, the prospect of the election to come. And she did say that some unnamed MP said it's probably cost us the election. I mean, what are you hearing in terms of within caucus about whether Jody Wilson-Raybould should stay, but also about where they are less than 8 months to a big vote?
I think I would agree that there are some who are worried. I haven't had any yet who said to me this could cost us the election, or this will, but they said that they are wondering if it could. I think it's hard to judge that kind of thing at this point because it's so early and there are still 6 months to go. And I'm a big believer that in an election, even weeks to go can make a huge difference, as we saw with the past few. But there is a high level of concern because it's not like the event happened and then the scandal broke and then it wrapped up and everyone's moving on. Like I was saying when I was speaking to you earlier, it's kind of dragging out, right? It's a really prolonged thing. We don't know if she's going to remain in caucus. What happens the next time there is caucus? Is she going to be in the room? What might she say next? And remember, there's that whole period of time after she was Attorney General that she feels she can't talk about because the waiver that the Prime Minister granted she interprets as not extending to that time. Well, that time also involves a lot of sort of potentially controversial things for this government and for her, to be fair. We don't know what actually made her resign. What happened in those conversations with the Prime Minister? Does she feel like he misrepresented her? So I think because there are so many outstanding questions, there is a nervousness among a lot of Liberals that this ends up being something that takes a long time, that is drawn out. Even the Ethics Commissioner's investigation usually doesn't happen overnight.
No.
And it's the timing of it that will be so important to them when it concerns the election.
Mark Mendocino was on with me earlier this morning. He expressed solid confidence in the Prime Minister, which, as we say, did not happen on Wednesday when Jody Wilson-Raybould was asked that very question. Pause with me, if you would, Vassy, and we'll listen together to the comments from the Prime Minister as he arrived at Rideau Hall. We saw that tape, but he did speak as he was going in, and let's listen to this together and see if we can hear what he had to say.
Is there still a deal on the table for SNC?
Lovely day this morning, isn't it?
Would you like to come answer some of our questions?
Have a good day, guys.
And that was it. So the voice there was Katie Simpson in the scrum outside asking, is there still a deal on the table for SNC-Lavalin? Because, again, Carla Qualtrough saying yesterday that as far as she understood, it was still a matter being considered. And David Lametti, who is now the Justice Minister, has said in interviews publicly and previously, Vassy, that indeed he is still looking at whether SNC-Lavalin should have a deferred prosecution agreement in this matter. Strategically, though, anybody I've asked that question on my program anyways, I mean, optics-wise, it would be toxic.
It sure might be. I mean, it's if you listening to Jody Wilson-Raybould's testimony and the number of times that someone, according to her, and again, we don't know this for fact, but according to her, said we need to find a solution. It would come as no surprise that they're still looking for that solution now, because they repeated it over and over again. They went to great lengths to find, according to her, an outside legal opinion or cover via op-eds to make that decision. It's clearly, according to her testimony, the decision that the Prime Minister wants to make. He wants the Attorney General to intervene, to direct the Director of Public Prosecutions to pursue a DPA and not prosecute this company for those criminal charges, as she had said that she was going to do. So I imagine it is still very much on the table, but the point you bring up is I think germane to the story.
Yes.
Is entirely valid. Are the optics of that?
Yes.
I mean, I cannot imagine outside of Quebec and the Quebec government, which has vocally expressed that solution, wanting that solution, what the reaction across the rest of the country might be.
The only thing from the Prime Minister in answer to that question was lovely day this morning. So that is what we heard from the Prime Minister as he arrived. And again, as we keep an eye on this inside Rideau Hall for the swearing-in ceremony and the shuffle itself, but you can see the much smaller number of seats than is usual at this time. It is just a three-person shuffle, three-person swearing-in ceremony that we'll watch live starting in just about 10 minutes. And you can see some empty seats, the three in the front row for Lawrence Mcauley, for Marie-Anne Monsef, and for Marie-Claude Bibeau. And they are going to be shuffled into their new positions. Lawrence Mcauley as the Minister of Veterans Affairs, Marie-Claude Bibeau as Minister of Agriculture, Marie-Anne Monsef retaining her title and her job as the Minister for the Status of Women, and adding to that, Minister of International Development. Vassy, stand by for a second because I have another couple of questions for you, but I just want to check in one more time with Janice McGregor, who has been outside watching the events going through that main door at Rideau Hall. Janice, just checking in with you one more time. Anything you want to add from what you've seen there or heard from anybody going in terms of what we should expect, or any of the strategic moves with this cabinet shuffle?
Yeah, everybody, all the players are inside as far as we know. We were looking for Michael Warnock to see if maybe he would come in this front door, but alas, no. The clerk of the Privy Council often at these cabinet swearing-ins, and certainly he was not a household name maybe before his testimony before the Justice Committee, but sort of we know him now, don't we? So yeah, that was another face that we were keeping an eye out for here. But there are a couple of different ways in, so it's just possible that we haven't seen him. But yes, all the players inside, and frankly, a little quiet right now. Again, as I mentioned previously, a bit of a scaled back affair, a bit toned down from what we often see at these swearing-ins when you have a larger group of ministers and more strategic moves at play.
Janice, thank you for everything with us this morning. Really appreciate it. I know you're going to be standing by when those three arrive at the microphone together, all three of them, to answer reporters' questions following the swearing-in, which is set to begin in just about 8 minutes from now. And we're going to keep our eye firmly on that chamber for the ceremony itself. It's going to be hosted by Vassy Kapelos from Power and Politics, who is still in our studio with me this half hour. And Vassy, I'm appreciating this extra. I get half an hour to tap into your knowledge and help us understand from your perspective as you've covered this wall to wall. This morning, one of my first guests this morning was Jamie Watt, who's a crisis manager, conservative strategist, of course, long time, but talking about, from his perspective, how the government extricates itself from this mess. And one of the things that he said is heads should roll. Jerry Butts is not enough, in his view, that there needs to be other top-level officials who resign and admit culpability in all of this. Is there any talk of that there, and who might you suggest, if that's even something under consideration? Yeah,
not really. I'd be surprised, to be honest. I take his point, and I think from a crisis communications perspective, it would make sense, but a lot of things have not made sense from a communications perspective, from the government's perspective as well, since this happened. I would be surprised, because if you listen to the Liberals, and I listened to your interview with Marco Mendocino, which was reflective, I think, of the general messaging from the Liberals over the past 48 hours, they are insistent that they did nothing wrong. They keep saying that this is a matter of interpretation. They are sort of very much focused on the idea that Jody Wilson-Raybould said nothing illegal happened, that she didn't believe that the pressure she felt was contravening the criminal code. But they're kind of ignoring the whole inappropriate side of things, right, to be fair. And so if you're insisting that you did nothing wrong and that you are raising issues that are totally within the realm of acceptable and appropriate, I would be surprised. I mean, by letting somebody go or quote unquote head to roll, that's an admission that isn't the case, okay, right? And so it would be a big change in messaging. I'm not saying it would be the wrong thing to do. It might help them in the long run, but right now their story seems to be, we didn't do anything wrong, we didn't do anything illegal.
And everything that we were doing, anything that we were considering was for the economic well-being of the country, right? It seems that we're hearing more and more people line up along that theme and message. We had that from the finance minister yesterday, and we've had that previously from the Prime Minister himself. Speaking of the Prime Minister, is he someone that the Justice Committee should hear from?
Well, the opposition certainly thinks so, and I would expect the calls for that to increase. And I would say that they sort of were buoyed the other day by the story that I don't think many of us were anticipating, and that is the almost direct implication of the Prime Minister by Jody Wilson-Raybould when she referred to that September 17th meeting that they had, which was supposed to be about something else, she says, and actually the clerk of the Privy Council described the meeting as the same thing, set up for another reason. She said at the outset the Prime Minister raised the issue of SNC, and then what sort of threw her off and she deemed inappropriate was when he said that he was the minister, that the Quebec election was coming up and he is an MP from Quebec, the member from Papineau, and she distinctly defined that as inappropriate. She almost described it as a red line. She delineated that line, and so I think that the fact that she described, I mean, that conversation in and of itself, I imagine would bolster the calls for the Prime Minister to appear before committee. I also don't think that that's very likely. It would be pretty much unprecedented. Even Stephen Harper was once, during the whole Mike Duffy thing, the Ethics Committee wanted to hear from him, and he didn't want to go before the committee either. They haven't ruled it out, people I've talked to in the Prime Minister's office, but I would be very surprised if that actually happened. That will not stop the calls for him to appear, though.
No. Or the calls that we've heard as we get set to conclude together. The calls from the Conservatives for his resignation, and the calls from the NDP too, but the Conservatives supporting for public inquiry and for RCMP investigation. Andrew Scheer sending a letter to the Commissioner. We also had, as I was just speaking with Peter MacKay, 5 former Attorneys General, provincially and federally, saying the same thing to the RCMP Commissioner, urging a full investigation. As far as additional probes alongside Ethics Commissioner, alongside House Justice Committee, where do you think this is likely to go, Vassy, based on what we've heard this week?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think at this point they are set on using the Justice Committee and the Ethics Commissioner, and their idea of a nonpartisan investigation falls squarely in the Ethics Commissioner's realm. I think that there might be something that changes that, though. If we were to hear, for example, in that space of time I was describing that Jody Wilson-Raybould feels she can't talk since the period after she left the role of Attorney General and when she moved into Veterans Affairs, if there are more revelations, let's say there, that implicate the Prime Minister or implicate more members of his staff or high-level people who run the government, I don't know, it might be hard to resist those calls, especially for an inquiry. There is a big question mark about what the RCMP is going to investigate, if it will investigate, what kind. I mean, it's so hard to find out. They won't confirm or deny whether an investigation is going on. There have certainly been, as you've pointed out, a mixed reaction among the legal community. Some of them say that this is, beyond inappropriate, that there could be portions of the criminal code that were contravened. Is that something for the RCMP to look into? They would say yes. There are others, including Jody Wilson-Raybould, who said she didn't think anything met that bar of illegality. So I don't know. I honestly think it's kind of a big question mark right now. If the RCMP gets involved, it obviously changes things, and it becomes even more serious. It's serious right now, but it becomes even more serious. A public inquiry, I wouldn't rule it out completely at this point either, because these things have a way of getting bigger, and if they do, it might be hard for the government to keep resisting one.
Vassy, thank you so much for this half hour, setting up what you're going to take over and host on through with Power and Politics, an early edition, Vassy Kapelos, and then, of course, back at 5 o'clock. It's been excellent coverage throughout this, Vassy, and we'll look forward to the next installment, and there's no end in sight for you and your team. So we'll be back to you for more later on in just a moment. And as we let Vassy go to get ready for that special coverage getting underway in just about 2 minutes here on CBC News Network, let me just, as we keep our eye on the chamber inside Rideau Hall and await the Governor General, await the Prime Minister, and you see there on the right the 3 empty seats. If you're just joining us, we know the shuffle is going to take place with 3 ministers, Lawrence Mcauley, now Minister of Agriculture, about to become the Minister of Veterans Affairs and to take over the portfolio that Jody Wilson-Raybould vacated. We have as well Marie-Claude moving in as the first female ever to become a Minister of Agriculture for Canada, and Marie-Claude Monsef, who is the Minister of Status of Women right now, and she will retain that title, and as well add the responsibilities of Minister of International Development. What a week it has been. Stay with us for ongoing coverage here on CBC News Network, and I will see you on Monday for the continuation of the story which grips the country and Canadians. You're watching CBC News Network.
I'm Vassy Kapelos. Welcome to a special edition of Power in Politics. We are live coming to you from Ottawa, where the Prime Minister is about to shuffle his cabinet in the wake of Jody Wilson-Raybould's abrupt departure last month. CBC News has learned who is going where. 3 ministers are getting new job titles this morning. Let's start off with Minister of Agriculture Lawrence Mcauley, longtime Liberal MP, will take over the Veterans Affairs portfolio, formerly and briefly held by Wilson-Raybould. Minister of International Development Marie-Claude, she's in the middle there of your screen, will take over the agricultural file. And the Minister for Women and Gender Equality will keep her current job, that's Marie-Claude Monsef right there, but she'll also pick up the International Development portfolio. We thought the Prime Minister's shuffle back in January was his last before the federal election, but then, of course, the SNC-Lavalin story broke, and a lot has happened in the weeks that have followed, including Wilson-Raybould's resignation from cabinet and her testimony this week, nearly 4 hours, wherein she alleged that she was repeatedly and inappropriately pressured to intervene in SNC-Lavalin's criminal case. Our Janice McGregor is over at Rideau Hall. She's been watching all the arrivals this morning, and I think she joins us now. Hey, Janice, thanks for being with us. So we went over the big picture there of who's moving where. What can you tell us about what you're seeing there?
Yeah, hi Vassy. Yes, we just saw Welton Atinchik go in, actually, the front door and say hi to everyone. He is, of course, the top bureaucrat now at Veterans Affairs, but a former chief of the defense staff. Interesting, this will be his second Veterans Affairs minister in 6 weeks, right? Not a lot of continuity for his department through the life of this Trudeau government, or frankly, people saying there have been 17 different Veterans Affairs ministers since the Chrétien era. That is a lot of turnover in a file with, as we've been talking about all morning on News Network, a file with some pressing issues, some compelling needs, and something that remains both a budgetary and a policy challenge for this government. So Lawrence Mcauley takes that on. Kind of fits with the playbook to have a minister from Atlantic Canada. As you've mentioned, a lot of jobs in Atlantic Canada, a lot of veterans in Atlantic Canada, and it is a region where this portfolio is taken very seriously, and people care very much about it there. So having a minister from Prince Edward Island really allows this government maybe to do that kind of regional outreach and take on these challenges head on, close to the people who are very concerned about it. But a lot else interesting in these moves with the other 2 women involved. Canada's first female agriculture minister, is someone who covers the farm beat a little bit. I think this will be perceived as a pretty big deal in that sector. They've done a lot of work to promote the role of women in agriculture and the food industry generally, trying to position it in 2019 as not full of dudes anymore, less John Deere and sort of more kind of innovation and 21st century thinking in that sector. And so very interesting for Mr. Trudeau to put a female atop that department now going forward, and interesting as well to see a francophone minister from Quebec take that on, because when I put my trade reporter hat on, I can tell you she is going into a real hotbed of opinions about what kind of compensation is required for Canada's supply managed agriculture sectors, dairy farmers in particular. She is from the eastern townships of Quebec. She will know this file well. She will know what she's getting into in terms of the kind of stakeholder groups, politically powerful stakeholder groups, people who have the ability to see that your party wins or loses in certain seats in Quebec next time. So she will be taking on that big challenge, and it is not a small thing, actually, to be the agriculture minister in the run-up to this particular election when this government wants to win some seats in Quebec. And finally, what can you say about Marie-Claude Monsef? A compelling personal narrative bringing her to the cabinet table in the first place. And now we see someone who comes from a background, a refugee background, taking on international development, as well as the women and gender equality portfolio, kind of a melding of sort of two things they've always emphasized, the need to support women as part of your development work around the world. And if you elevate the position of women and girls in areas like education and nutrition, you actually elevate whole societies. So there is a natural affinity one for the other there, and an interesting person to take it on just because of probably the kind of personal passion she'll bring to it because of her own background. So a bit of a renaissance maybe for Ms. Monsef in this cabinet as she takes on more responsibilities.
Okay, thank you so much, Janice, and we'll check in with you throughout the hour. We're looking in to, if you look on your screen there, that is the room where the ceremony will take place. I believe we just saw Michael Warnock walk in, the Clerk of the Privy Council. We'll take a listen in for a little bit.
Please rise and welcome the Ministers Designate, the Prime Minister and the Governor-General of Canada. Pour débuter cette cérémonie d'assermentation des membres du 29e Conseil des ministres canadiens, veuillez vous lever et accueillir les ministres désignés, le Premier ministre et la Gouverneure générale du Canada.
You're looking now at the entrance of the three ministers who are shuffling portfolios or adding a title to their name, the Governor-General there, Julie Payette, and the Prime Minister as well.
Veuillez vous asseoir. The Clerk of the Privy Council will now seek the Governor-General's consent to proceed. Le greffier du Conseil privé demandera maintenant à la Gouverneure générale la permission de procéder.
Clerk of the Privy Council, of course, is Michael Warnock, whom we've heard testify last week at the heart of this entire controversy with Jody Wilson-Raybould. He will testify again.
With the Governor-General's approval, we will now proceed with the ceremony. Maintenant que la gouverneure générale a signifié son approbation, nous procéderons à la cérémonie. The ministers who are privy councillors and who are changing responsibilities will please come forward to take the oath of office. Les ministres qui sont membres du Conseil privé et qui changent de responsabilité sont priés de s'avancer pour prêter le serment d'office. The Honourable Lawrence Mcauley, Minister of Veterans Affairs and Associate Minister of National Defence. L'Honorable Lawrence Mcauley, Ministre des Anciens Combattants et Ministre associé de la Défense nationale.
I, Lawrence Mcauley, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skills and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Veterans Affairs and Associate Minister of National Defence, so help me God.
L'Honorable Marie-Claude Bibeau, Ministre de l'Agriculture et de l'Agroalimentaire. The Honourable Marie-Claude Bibeau, Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food.
Moi, Marie-Claude Bibeau,
I, Marie-Claude
je promets
Bibeau,
et
do
jure
solemnly and sincerely
solennellement et sincèrement
promise
qu'au
and
mieux de ma
swear
compétence et de
that I
ma
will
connaissance,
truly and faithfully and to the best of my skill and knowledge execute the powers and trusts reposed in
en
me
qualité de ministre de
as
l'Agriculture
Minister
et de
of
l'Agroalimentaire.
Agriculture and
Que Dieu me
Agri-Food.
vienne en aide.
So help me God.
I, Marie-Claude Bibeau, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food. So help me God.
The Honorable Mariam Monsef, Minister of International Development and Minister for Women and Gender Equality. L'Honorable Mariam Monsef, Ministre du Développement international et Ministre des Femmes et de l'Égalité des genres.
Moi, Mariam
I,
Monsef,
Mariam
je
Monsef,
promets et
do
déclare
solemnly
solennellement
and
et
sincerely
sincèrement
promise and
qu'au
declare
mieux de ma compétence
that I will
et
truly
de ma
and faithfully
connaissance,
and to the best of my
j'exécuterai
skill
loyalement et
and
fidèlement les
knowledge
pouvoirs
execute the
et je
powers
m'acquitterai
and
des
trusts
responsabilités qui m'ont été
reposed
confiées
in
en
me
qualité
as
de
Minister
du Développement
of International Development
et ministre des
and
Femmes
Minister
et
for
de
Women
l'Égalité des genres.
and Gender Equality.
I, Mariam Monsef, do solemnly and sincerely promise and declare that I will truly and faithfully and to the best of my skill and knowledge execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of International Development and Minister for Women and Gender Equality. Thank you so much.
The Governor General, the Prime Minister, and the Clerk of the Privy Council will now sign the oath book. La gouverneure générale, le Premier ministre et le greffier du Conseil privé.
We're watching the swearing-in ceremony of a little bit of a cabinet shuffle, 3 new titles for 3 ministers who were already in cabinet. The first one being Lawrence Mcauley, longtime Liberal MP, moves from the Ministry of Agriculture to the Ministry of Veterans Affairs. You're looking right now on your screen at the Prime Minister, Governor General Julie Payette, and the Clerk of the Privy Council, Michael Warnock. Marie-Claude Bibeau moves from International Development to Agriculture, taking over for Lawrence Mcauley. And Mariam Monsef, who currently holds the portfolio of Women and Gender Equality, adds to that the development portfolio. As I said, we've been watching the cabinet shuffle for the past few minutes. It's a swearing-in ceremony that you're looking at right now. It's all happening, though, in the wake of a very tumultuous few weeks for this government. The Globe and Mail first reporting that Jody Wilson-Raybould, the former Attorney General, felt she was inappropriately pressured by members of the Prime Minister's office and other high-ranking members of this government. Jody Wilson-Raybould herself corroborating those allegations and adding to them.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Nearly 3.5 or nearly 4 hours of testimony this week in front of the Justice Committee. I want to bring in our panel. We'll continue watching this ceremony, but we've got three very sharp minds sitting with me to sort of interpret what this cabinet shuffle means and the shifts, the moves. I'm joined by our Parliamentary Bureau Chief, Rob Russo, Marika Walsh of iPolitics, and Evan Dyer, also of CBC. So, Rob, I'll start with you. It's kind of odd to watch in the smiling faces. Definitely not the kind of dramatic and emotional ceremonies we've seen before with cabinet shuffles, but in the wake of everything that's going on, it's certainly something to look at.
I think we have to underscore why we're here. We're here because the government is reeling. We're here because this is part of a set play that's not going to stop here. This is something that's going to endure. Because I'm on a show with someone named Vassy Kapelos. I studied my Greek mythology before I came here.
My father appreciates it. Yeah.
And if we look at what's going to happen over the next little while, the Prime Minister is going to be lying prostrate, it seems, for a little while, like Prometheus, with the eagle sinking her talons into his liver. And the eagle right now is Jody Wilson-Raybould. That's not going to go away. What does that mean? That means that in a couple of weeks, we're going to have more people in front of committee. Right about the same time that the government is hoping to get a budget out, an election budget. Very few people will be paying attention to that budget as a result of the enduring nature of this controversy. So the government's in tough. Today, not a day of joy, really. It's a day that was made necessary because of a reeling government.
And let's talk about some of the specific moves. And first, I just want to welcome everyone watching on our Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. We're live streaming this. We'll take your questions as they come in this hour, so please post them there. Of course, we're talking about a cabinet shuffle that occurred in the wake of Jody Wilson-Raybould's resignation. Marika, let's go over some of the moves, because Lawrence Mcauley to Veterans Affairs. Lawrence Mcauley, I think, has won 9 elections as a Liberal. Rob would know better than me, but and has said that he's going to run for a 10th. What do you make of that move?
I think in some ways it's a smart move, because Veterans Affairs has seen so much turnover, so much upheaval in the last few months. Putting somebody who is an experienced minister in that file to maybe steady the ship, I think, is smart. It is also smart because he is from the East Coast, and that is a big issue and a big file on the East Coast. So I think they check those boxes off. It means that they're not gender balanced anymore, but I don't think that's their big issue right now.
Evan, what do you think?
That's, he's a veteran, all right, but he's not a veteran of the armed forces. He's a veteran of politics, 31 years. And it is striking now. I guess this would be the, including acting, this is the 5th new appointment to that department, and we haven't yet seen a veteran. And you have to wonder why, because the outgoing Conservative government had a veteran, Aaron O'Toole. And we were just discussing, what about Karen McCrimmon, the Canadian Canadian Forces veteran who, had a pretty distinguished career in the forces. And perhaps the reason that they didn't reach out to her is because this doesn't seem like a time when they would want to have to push anyone else out of cabinet. That hasn't gone terribly well for them lately.
Yeah.
And so, at least this way there's no embittered outsiders. They've got enough of that on their hands already.
Yeah, that's a good point to highlight, the fact they just kept it inside. Right?
Yeah, I think Mr. Mcauley could be called, this, in some ways, the safety minister, too, because he's safely going to be ensconced in there. It didn't matter which tide was washing over the country. Lawrence Mcauley was going to get reelected in Cardigan since 1988, reliably, no matter feast or famine for the Liberals. I will say, though, that with Veterans Affairs, the department in many ways being centered in Charlottetown and Prince Edward Island, there is a bit of a dilution of the power that minister will have, because a minister from another region will bring their regional power base with them to that department, as well as the power that comes with being Veterans Affairs Minister. But in this instance, with a department that's now seen as a bit of a graveyard, with when you look at what happened to Kent Hare, when you look at Jody Wilson-Raybould, safety first for that department.
There are a lot. I mean, it's also an election issue, right? Veterans. I mean, we're talking about one election issue with Jody Wilson-Raybould, but there is. I remember in the 2015 campaign, the Liberals, Marika, certainly made a lot of promises about fixing what they said the Tories did wrong with veterans. The jury's still out on that, and I don't know if 6 months is going to change the opinion of veterans.
No, I guess that goes to the election budget. That's still to come. But I think, a lot of vets would say not enough has changed. And in some cases, the promises of being better than Stephen Harper's government have fallen short. I think, though, that many veterans will see Lawrence Mcauley as somebody who they can rely on to not make it worse. And I think that's, he is an experienced cabinet minister, and that matters.
Evan, what about the backdrop? I was pointing out that we saw Michael Warnock, obviously a central part of this ceremony. He is at the heart of all of this right now for everyone watching. That's the clerk of the Privy Council, kind of the top public servant in the government. And he testified, last week? Friday.
Yeah.
My God, the days of melding together. In a pretty explosive testimony that was then countered in large part by Jody Wilson-Raybould. And he's now going to be called before the Justice Committee again next week.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting about him is that while the Conservatives and the NDP can't agree in calling for the resignation of Justin Trudeau, they have both called for the resignation of Michael Warnock. So you have to feel that he's in a very exposed position. But at the same time, he is probably unlikely to resign. We saw a pretty defiant person on Friday, right? So who would fire him? The Prime Minister's office. And how can they fire him without conceding wrongdoing? So I would say that he's pretty safe in his job for now, but he's going to face some tough questions. And he left some windows open in his testimony on Friday, too. If you remember, he said, well, I don't think I did anything wrong, but the Ethics Commissioner will decide. And, of course, there's the message that I sent and the message that Jody Wilson-Raybould received, which seemed to kind of leave a little bit of wiggle room for her possibly interpreting his remarks as threats. While he denied they were about consequences for her personally, he didn't entirely shut that door, it seemed to me.
I don't know what you thought, Rob, but I felt like at the end of his testimony, that conversation that he and Jody Wilson-Raybould focused on, that December conversation on the phone, seemed to be interpreted very differently by both of them. So he was like, I just wanted to check in on a number of issues, including SNC, raise the fact that there are consequences. And she said there are 3 instances that I felt like he was making veiled threats. He invoked the Prime Minister's name. He said that he was dug in, that he would not change his mind. Do you think will he be able to rebut that?
He's certainly going to try. He wants to come back, and when you combine that with the appearance of Gerald Butts, that week when they're together, that will be the week that the Empire strikes back. If we're looking at the trilogy of the arc of the narrative of this story, what I found really interesting was Mr. Butts said that not only was he eager to appear, but that he had some information that what might be of interest to the committee. I assume that includes some documents. I include that he is going to show up with some information that makes it look like that it wasn't a one-way conversation, it was a dialogue. The worm hasn't fully turned on this.
And he asked for time to prepare documents, too.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I think we should be prepared for more surprises that way.
I also think, though, that in her testimony the other day, Jody Wilson-Raybould, to me, it made me want to hear more from her deputy minister, because she is much less of a leading figure in this story. But I think she can be somebody who, in some ways, breaks this he said, she said logjam and be this other opinion on it. Now, she, of course, her boss is Warnock, so that, of course, complicates things. But I think hearing from her will also hopefully. And Jody Wilson-Raybould did talk about instances where, for example, she would be getting communication from the Minister of Finance office on the DPA and that sort of thing. I just want to remind our viewers that we have just watched the swearing-in ceremony of a kind of mini cabinet shuffle. 3 ministers who have either added to their titles or moved: Lawrence Mcauley, Marie-Claude Bibeau, and Mariam Monsef. We're waiting for those 3 to address reporters right now outside there. That's the microphone that you're looking at. The Prime Minister will not be addressing reporters, though normally when there is a cabinet shuffle, he does. He has talked to reporters throughout the week, and basically all the questions have been not on the subject matter at hand, but on the SNC matter. And on that, actually, we're getting a bunch of questions through Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, and most of those are also on SNC, which tells you a little bit about this cabinet shuffle and what people are really thinking. Evan, I'll start with you. Elliot Aronstam, I apologize if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, on YouTube asks, how will this scandal impact Trudeau's election polling and I think chances?
I guess that is the biggest question of all, isn't it? Well, it's already impacted him in the polling, it appears. They appear to have lost a few points already, and I don't think any of those polls have been conducted since Jody Wilson-Raybould's testimony. So
that'll be really interesting to see once
that's right. If there's already damage prior to that, you have to think there's going to be even more now. Then the question becomes, of course, how lasting is the damage? And also, can the Liberals push it back with that Empire Strikes Back that Rob was talking about, or with Jerry Butts coming in and showing documents that might refute elements of Jody Wilson-Raybould's testimony, if they can actually undercut some of her factual allegations and basically make it look like more of a case of a disgruntled employee than a minister protecting the rule of law in Canada, then they might be able to claw some points back.
Rob, Yvel Paquette on Facebook asks the same question Katie Simpson asked of the Prime Minister. Is there a deal for SNC? She asked the Prime Minister, Katie asked the Prime Minister that as he was walking into the ceremony. Is there still a deal on the table for SNC? And he said, I think it's a lovely day. And I will just say, it's not. It's freezing outside, but just to fact check that one thing. But Rob, what do you think about the prospects of that and the optics of it?
It would be very, very difficult now for them to make a deal with SNC. It was always there. Look, the biggest problem facing this government and facing Mr. Trudeau as well, if Ms. Wilson-Raybould's testimony is to be believed, he personally said, I'm an MP for Papineau. In other words, I have political skin in this game. It is the perception that this was a government that was trying to interfere in a prosecution for reasons of political gain. That's the biggest danger. And therein lies the gray area between obstruction of justice and unethical or unseemly behavior. Somewhere in there, it's all there. And I think that's what's very, very damaging to the Trudeau brand, that he was supposed to be a politician that was unlike the other politicians. But here we have a Prime Minister, if Ms. Wilson-Raybould is to be believed, and a government that's trying to enhance its political prospects by interfering in a prosecution.
And I thought she was very clear in her testimony that is how she defined inappropriate, right? Like it was when the prospect of the Quebec election was brought up, and the fact that the Prime Minister said, I am an MP in Quebec, the member for Papineau, and she said she looked him in the eye and said, are you telling me, I don't remember the exact, but are you telling me what to do? And he said, no. And she said, I would advise against that. Like, I felt that was a very dramatic moment. But it was also the way, that's how she delineated between, okay, you can talk about jobs, that's appropriate. But when you bring up our chances in Quebec, that isn't.
Yeah, and I mean, that was brought up more than once by Jody Wilson-Raybould. She said that Minister Morneau's chief of staff also raised the Quebec election as a reason why they should be interfering on SNC-Lavalin. And yesterday, Minister Morneau did not address that part. He said everything was done appropriately, but when you asked him about specifics, that was a no-go zone. So I think there are still a lot of questions to be answered there. And I'm very, to the question that Evan got, what their chances are in the next election, there's still some wild cards out there, like the ethics commissioner, and like this letter to the RCMP.
Yeah.
Those are kind of these things that are hovering in our peripheral vision that we don't know when they drop or if they drop.
Yeah, that's actually another question Grant Payne, Evan asks on Facebook, will the RCMP investigate?
Well, you have to think they're going to at least look at it very, very seriously. With a letter from a leader of the opposition that doesn't just make a vague allegation, he cites 2 specific clauses of the Canada Criminal Code. And I think most of us, on the face of it, looking at the allegation, would say, well, if the allegation is true, it certainly warrants a criminal investigation. And to find that out, they're going to have to investigate. So now I think we're seeing other past attorneys general also
5 of them.
Piling on. So this would be almost impossible for the RCMP at this point, I think, not to investigate.
Yeah, that letter from former attorney generals includes Peter MacKay, I think Jonathan Dennis, who was one in Alberta, 4 Conservative former AGs and 1 NDP. And actually, I heard Peter MacKay, who did an interview with our Heather Hiscox a little bit earlier, say that there were going to be some Liberals and some others, but at the last minute that they backed out, and he assumed that they felt uncomfortable.
The problem with the case made by the former attorneys general is the one who's making the most serious allegations right now on Parliament Hill says that nothing illegal happened.
Yeah.
And when you talk to former investigators, people who have tried to bring prosecutions in the past, they say that's pretty corrosive to the attempt to bring charges. However, we, like everybody else, we've had the RCMP on speed dial, and we've worn our fingers into a nub trying to get an answer from them. I think the most instructive answer we get from them is they are aware of what's going on. Right. And that's code for we're watching, we're listening, we're doing our homework, and we'll let you know. They are carefully calibrating what to do next.
It's also interesting to see the degree to which the Liberals and the government have jumped on that differentiation between illegality and inappropriateness. Like the past 24 hours, every single MP or minister that we've interviewed has said, well, she said she wasn't directed. She said it wasn't illegal. And they don't want to address the inappropriate part of it at all.
Totally.
And I expect, and I don't know if you do, that to continue, right? Like an insistence.
Right. And the problem then for the Liberals is that the bar for most politicians is not whether or not they've acted illegally. And
well, it wasn't supposed to be for them either, right?
No.
Wasn't Trudeau
that's
setting the bar
thing.
higher for...
Right.
And that's what I put to David Lametti yesterday, and they frankly can't really answer that, because while they will talk about her comments and what she said in reference to whether it's illegal or not, they won't broach anything that she says on the inappropriate. They won't even entertain questions about what she said and what they feel about what she said and their thoughts on it. They just say, it's difference of interpretation.
Right.
Yeah.
So they take comfort from some of it, but not all of it, and they're pretending that doesn't exist.
A lot of it will come down to the meaning of the words veiled threat. Just how veiled are the threats? Are they so veiled that they can't be prosecuted as threats? Are they perhaps so veiled that in fact they're only imaginary? That's also a possibility we have to keep in mind, right?
But even if they're veiled, I mean, she was saying that they were veiled insofar as she would be demoted. Like there would be a consequence for her in cabinet. That seemed to be my understanding of her testimony, and that wouldn't be criminal.
Would it not be? I don't know. I'm not a lawyer,
Maybe.
but that sounds to me like a personal.
But we're not. Maybe
consequence.
I'm the wrong person to be saying this, because I am not a lawyer. But
if you look at Andrew Scheer's letter, and I haven't compared it to the wording in the criminal code, but he says in the first of the two charges he cites that it's an offence to provoke or to seek to provoke fear in an attorney general. And most people, if you threaten them with the loss of their job, you're provoking fear. It doesn't only have to be fear of physical violence or something of that kind.
And she said that. She said, I felt anxiety at one point in her testimony.
oh yeah, she said at the end of the conversation to him, "I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop."
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty clear understanding at that point that she felt like her job was threatened.
And there has not been a reasonable or plausible reason given by anyone as to why she was demoted, why she was sent down in cabinet, why she was essentially fired.
Scott Bryson, that's the reason, right?
That's right. And that's like saying, I needed a hovercraft to go from point A to point B. And by the way, I filled it full of eels. It makes no sense, right?
We're just waiting. I should remind our viewers that we are waiting for, we just witnessed the swearing-in ceremony for a mini cabinet shuffle. 3 ministers have either taken on new titles or shifted positions. And the microphone that you're looking at right there, they will be standing up there. We're expecting them shortly. They were just sworn in. They will be addressing reporters. The Prime Minister will not be addressing reporters. Russ Clark on YouTube asks, Marie-Claude, what's the strategy of the cabinet shuffle?
The strategy of it,
Maybe
I mean, you could take that in a few different ways. There is a bit of a photo op that isn't surrounding Jody Wilson-Raybould right now, even though she is sort of the underlying reason behind it. I think the strategy is what we talked about a bit earlier about why Lawrence Mcauley is the person in Veterans Affairs. Marion Monsef is interesting. It seems like she's actually getting a second chance in a way to redeem herself after a very shaky start to all of this. She was demoted in cabinet, and now she is, now she has 2 portfolios, and they're both portfolios that are very important to this government. So it seems like she has come out ahead.
I do think that the Monsef move and the move of Marie-Claude Bibeau is very interesting for a couple of reasons. Monsef is in Peterborough-Kawartha. Yeah. That is a riding that flips back and forth regularly with whoever wins power off. And it's often seen as a bellwether riding. A riding with strains of conservatism. If they want to shore up their chances of winning this riding, they needed to bring her portfolio up after a pretty stumbling start to her career. Marie-Claude Bibeau is an interesting choice as well. She goes from a portfolio that does not have a huge budget to one that now has billions and billions of dollars at its disposal, huge amount of employees, and there are a whole bunch, 10,000 dairy farmers still in the province of Quebec. right? And
was this a message to them? Like, do you think this is symbolic in that respect?
It is, but the other thing that's important about her is I watched her the last couple of weeks on a lot of the French language television shows and on radio. She is a very effective communicator. She was defending the government ably during this controversy, and with a bumped up portfolio, she'll be doing that more often. I think that she's also there as an effective spokeswoman in French for the government on this controversy.
Evan, what do you think of the Bibeau and Monsef appointments?
Monsef actually makes sense from the point of view that Canada is supposed to have a feminist foreign policy now. And if you look at our development projects, a lot of them are about women and girls. So taking the Minister of Gender Equality and putting her in that portfolio actually makes sense, not just on the partisan political level. And I would say I would agree about Marie-Claude Bibeau. She's a likable, eloquent person. She's from Quebec. That does make sense too. I do think though that the main thing about this cabinet shuffle is to keep it in the family effect. These are just people switching chairs. There's no people going into the room or out of the room.
Damage.
And that I think is the main
And
issue.
you can't really say that anybody was demoted in this one,
No.
right? Which I think is an important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They don't want those characterizations out there.
No, they don't want that out there.
But there are a lot of people, many of the men in this caucus, who are wondering if they're ever going to get a chance at a cabinet shot.
Hey, the way this thing, the number of cabinet shuffles they've had lately, that you don't rule it out. Yeah, don't. Actually, that's that question that we got. Zachary Sloboda on Facebook asks, it seems that Trudeau has shuffled his cabinet quite often during his time as Prime Minister. How common was it for previous Prime Ministers to shuffle their cabinet as Trudeau has done?
It's
pretty common.
It's I wouldn't say unprecedented, but it is out of the realm of the ordinary to be here once a month. And I'm sure that the government never planned on this happening either. These are extraordinary times. I know that word gets tossed around rather cavalierly, but there's nothing ordinary about what's going on, and they take no joy in being in front of Rideau Hall and meeting with the Governor-General under these circumstances on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm. Also, though, when Stephen Harper would do a cabinet shuffle, we wouldn't always know about it until after.
Oh, no.
Right? So you also didn't see these specials.
Well, you mentioned Aaron O'Toole, and I remember when that happened. He was a veteran taking over that portfolio, but it was because Julian Fantino was the former minister there, and it was pretty much a disaster. There were all those. Remember the wife of one of the disabled veterans was chasing him, and he was young. And anyway, I remember all that. And that day, they wouldn't even tell us. Like, we just stood there, and it was so cold, and scream questions at Aaron O'Toole, who shouted over a car to respond to them. So yeah.
But the Harper government, I just looked it up. They had 5 ministers of Veterans Affairs in 10 years. We're already up to 5 in 3 years.
Just 3 years.
Yeah, so,
oh my goodness. Yeah. Okay. If the Liberals, Tosh Turner asks, if the Liberals keep changing their message, will that erode voter confidence? And this is interesting because that's the way the opposition has characterized the Liberals' messaging on this, and specifically the Prime Ministers on this story, on the SNC story, that the story has changed all the time. I don't know if that's necessarily completely true, but the amount of information given has certainly evolved, right? Like, you started with a little bit and then added and added and added, and now you see a solidification. We're standing up for jobs, basically. Evan, what do you think?
I don't think they've moved their basic line that much. They've perhaps retreated a little bit in the sense that they're more willing to acknowledge that they were worried about the jobs. Though they always were making that point to some extent. They never said, look, we never told her what she should do. They never said we never tried to suggest that there were factors she should consider.
Well, they did say we never directed her.
We never directed her, but they sort of left themselves some room to say we were just trying to bring context, as Michael Warnock put it, to her. That it's not a flip-flop in their position. The problem, of course, is that as they retreat back and they acknowledge, we were trying to make her worry about the jobs, then you wonder, why were you worrying about the jobs? Were you worrying about the jobs because you're riding this in Papineau? Were you worrying about the jobs because there was a Quebec provincial election coming up? And it's sort of, as they move back to that trench, they're kind of falling back to the one after it, and that's a much less defensible one. Once it becomes about your own electoral chances, you're clearly into an area where you shouldn't be going.
I think they got in trouble because they tried to be lawyerly at the beginning, and using that word that you mentioned, Vassy.
Directed.
Yeah, when the Prime Minister said, I never directed her to any particular destination on this. And then they went to Michael Warnock, who said, there's a lot of pressure involved in these things. I think if they would have started with that, they would have been better off. If they would have said, this is a huge issue involving thousands of jobs, involving pensioners. We have vigorous debate on these issues inside Cabinet. There was a vigorous debate on this one. In the end, we have decided to proceed with the prosecution.
Absolutely.
Point final, as they say, right? If they would have done that, they would have been better off. But the evolution of the language hurt them.
They never really even admitted to the fact that they wanted that conclusion, right? Like, yes, we 100% believe that the Attorney General should intervene in this because it will save jobs. Even now, they're just saying, we're standing up for jobs. But if you listen to her testimony and you believe it, because of course we don't know, I mean, we don't know if it's factually completely accurate, we just know that it's her version of events. But the way that she laid it out, I mean, how many times do you have to hear, we want a solution, there will be a solution, we have decided we want a solution? That hasn't been reflected in their public comments, even now, once that testimony has come out.
I don't know, though, if they are even able to say that right now, because it is before the courts, it is being appealed. And I don't know if the sitting Prime Minister says, we want this DPA, and then the judge over.
Well, it wouldn't be something. I don't think it'd be something any government would say publicly. But now that, as they say, the sausage casing has been peeled back, and we know that they were saying that repeatedly.
There was a Liberal backbencher who said if this had been Jean Chrétien, he would have just said, "What do you mean? It's 9,000 jobs. Of course we did this." And you can almost imagine him saying that, and you can imagine a lot of people then accepting that, and yet they didn't handle it that way. They didn't handle it that way.
No, and I think also the question that I keep thinking of, Rob, is, okay, it's 9,000 jobs. First of all, do we know for certain that absolving them of this prosecution would save those jobs?
No.
Nobody has made that case. But also, to what lengths are you willing to go to save those jobs? Like, where is your marker of what you should and shouldn't do? Where is your ethical boundary of what you're going to do to save those jobs?
No, and how can you say that you believe in the rule of law when the prosecutor says we're going in this direction and you continue to browbeat the prosecutor's boss to get her to try and move into another direction? And as we found out this morning, that line of argument has repercussions all the way around the world. In Beijing this morning, where we had a spokesman for the Chinese government saying, what is this rule of law in Canada in effect? And does it include in Canada provisions for political interference? So it's not just an issue that's having repercussions or echoes across the country. Now we have it having an impact on the Canadians who are being held in China.
And we're expecting actually a decision today from the Canadian courts on whether to proceed with Meng Wanzhou, who is the CFO of Huawei and who is supposed to be extradited to the U.S. We're expecting a decision today on whether that will happen. Interesting, though, as you note, that they are listening and watching in China to what's happening here. And that idea of the rule of law has been so central to basically every story that we've been covering over the past few months.
This is also, though, why this story is so damaging for Trudeau's brand, is because he has been the one talking about rule of law. Chrystia Freeland has been the one talking about rule of law, rules-based system, following international norms, all of these things that, they've kind of countered themselves with China, with Donald Trump in the U.S., and now all of a sudden the same questions are being thrown at them. And I think that's part of the reason why this does resonate with more Canadians, because it becomes more and more understandable.
We're here covering, everyone, a mini cabinet shuffle this morning. Lawrence Mcauley, Minister of Agriculture, has moved over to the portfolio of Veterans Affairs. Replacing him in Agriculture is Marie-Claude Bibeau, who used to head up International Development, and Maryam Monsef, who is the Minister overseeing the portfolio of Gender Equality, adds international development, to what she's in charge of. We're waiting that microphone there to hear from those three ministers any minute now. They just participated in a swearing-in ceremony with the Prime Minister and the Clerk of the Privy Council. We're told the Prime Minister has already left the building. In the past cabinet shuffles, he has addressed reporters, but he is not after this one. So we're gonna be watching that, and we'll of course take you to those newly titled ministers as soon as they appear before us. We just had a question. I'm not sure who asked it, but it was just up on the prompter, and I thought it was a good one. Is this the beginning or the end of JWR's Jody Wilson-Raybould political career? I think that's a good question. Chris Shaw on Facebook asked it.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting when we talked to her father, and he talked about her being reelected with a larger majority, and someday running for the leadership of the Liberal Party. The immediate question a lot of us have is, how long can she stay in the Liberal caucus? And it's clear that they're being very, very careful about expelling her. A lot of prime ministers might have given her the boot by now. Some people are suggesting that the Prime Minister looks enfeebled with every day that she remains in caucus while she expresses a lack of confidence in him and the cabinet. But they have to be very careful about giving her the boot. She has made it clear she wants to run again, and she wants to run again as a Liberal. There are people who sit beside her in that caucus who are very, very ill at ease with her there. So how long can her career last? Well, it depends. She's got a whole bunch of new admirers across the country. Could she run for the leadership someday? She might. She'd have to learn to speak French. She doesn't have that right now. But I don't know if she'd win a single vote among her caucus colleagues, except for one or two who've publicly expressed support.
Yeah. It's fascinating to see this whole idea that whether or not she will remain in caucus. She was asked very specifically during her testimony, do you have confidence in the Prime Minister? And she did not say, her answer was not yes. But then she came out after and spoke to reporters and almost dared the Prime Minister. She said, no, I don't expect anyone to kick me out. And then the Prime Minister said, well, I have to review all her testimony before deciding whether or not to. But like, how long, Evan, does he have before a decision has to be? How can you have someone in your caucus who doesn't have confidence in
And he did review her testimony and still couldn't reach a decision.
Yeah.
So, he had 24 hours to digest everything that she said. And he's obviously still weighing the costs and benefits of kicking her out. The costs are pretty obvious, though. It's very hard to have a person you don't trust in a caucus room where there's supposed to be confidentiality, where sensitive matters are discussed. We know she's a prolific note taker as well. She's definitely demonstrated that. So there's obviously a downside to having her there, but kicking her out, well, as Rob pointed out, the one thing that she did give them as a read to hang on to was that she said she didn't believe any illegality had occurred. If you kick her out and infuriate her even more, perhaps that little bit of restraint she has would evaporate.
But
and she'd
the
become
question the Prime Minister has to ask is at what price?
Yeah.
At what price? She's already got the head of the Prince Consort on a platter in Jerry Butts. So at what price? Does she want more heads? What is her price?
I don't think they can figure it out.
Well, they have to determine that, and then they have to determine if they're ready to pay that price. And if they are, fine. If not, they should move with dispatch.
I think a lot of it depends, though, on what we see in the testimony at committee in the next 2 weeks, right? Like if, as you said, the Empire Strikes Back and all of a sudden her version of events lacks credibility, that's a very different calculation for the Prime Minister than this current situation where she has a lot of goodwill outside of cabinet in Canada, and also a lot of people do also back her in caucus. There's certainly discomfort, understandably, but we have seen,
she has friends.
She has lots of friends in cabinet as well, and a lot of the women and the women cabinet ministers are some of her best friends in cabinet. So that also becomes very difficult to navigate.
There's two kinds of danger. There's the danger from her personally going even more rogue, and then there's also the danger of offending constituencies like the women in your own cabinet and women across the country
and
Indigenous people. Further damaging
I'm going to cut you off. I'm sorry, because the newly titled ministers have arrived at the podium. Let's take a listen.
Territory that the Algonquin peoples have called home for generations upon generations. Thanks for braving the cold. We are happy to take questions.
Morning. Une question pour Madame Bibeau, Raymond
A
Fillon
question
de
for
TVA.
Ms. Bibeau.
J'aimerais savoir ce que vous pensez de
I'd
votre
like to know
nouvelle
what you
affectation,
think of your
première
new
femme
assignment, the
ministre
first
de l'Agriculture dans
woman to
l'histoire du
become
Canada.
Minister of Agriculture in the history of Canada. Well, it's a great honor.
Très enthousiaste à l'idée
I'm
de
very enthusiastic about the
dorénavant
idea
ce
of
mandat pour agriculture
taking on this
et
mandate
agroalimentaire Canada. Vous
Agriculture
savez
and
que mon
Agri-Food
comté est un
Canada.
comté
You know
rural,
that my
particulièrement
riding
laitier.
is
Alors il y a déjà
a
une certaine
dairy
portion des
farm
dossiers
riding and
que
a
je
rural
maîtrise
riding,
assez bien,
so these are issues I'm familiar with. But certainly this is an important department, and I'm very, very proud to be the first woman to lead it. And of course, this is not an easy issue to handle with NAFTA and so forth. There are people in your riding who are not very happy, so what will your message be? Well, we're already working hard. There are committees that have been put in place, and they are working on the short term and see how we can follow up on the free trade agreements negotiated in recent years, and also what our vision will be over the long term. So I'm very anxious to be able to talk to all our partners, and so that we can find some direct solutions.
Minister Bibeau, the same question that my friend Ray asked in English, if you wouldn't mind, about your reflections on being the country's first ever female agriculture minister. What do you think of that?
Well, it's a huge privilege. I come from a rural riding, a dairy riding actually in south of Quebec, so I'm already very close to the agricultural producers in Quebec. I know quite a bit about supply management, and I really look forward to work with the agricultural producers on various issues.
Thank you very much. I have a question for Minister Mcauley. And while you're stepping up, I understand, Minister, this is your second tour of duty with Veterans Affairs. I understand you were once Secretary of State a long, long time ago for this particular job. This time around, you may have heard this, that some veterans groups are grumbling that they feel that that veterans is a bit of an afterthought with this particular government, and evidence of that is we see yet another minister having to pick up the file. So I wondered some messages to veterans who might feel that this portfolio does not have the priority that it might have back in the day when you were Secretary of State for Veterans Affairs.
Thank you very much. And indeed, I want to tell you I'm extremely proud and honored to represent the veterans at the Cabinet table. And yes, 20-some years ago, I was at Veterans Affairs. And without a question, our government has made a lot of changes in Veterans Affairs. But I'm not going to get into the details today. I have to get briefed. But the fact is, to represent veterans at the Cabinet table, it's a distinct honor. It's an honor to be a minister at the table in any portfolio, but to have the chance to be in Veterans Affairs really for the second time is indeed a great honor, and I look forward to traveling across the country, meeting veterans, and doing everything I possibly can to make sure the people who make sure that we live in peace and have democracy are well cared for. That's what I can tell the veterans.
Thank you.
Katie Simpson, CBC News. I have a question for all three ministers, so if all three would answer, I'd highly appreciate that. Are all three of you comfortable with Jody Wilson-Raybould remaining a member of caucus, even though she won't say she has confidence in the Prime Minister?
I would say that I know Jody quite well, and these decisions are made by the Prime Minister. And whatever decision that's made, I can live with any decision that is made. But I know Jody, well-respected lady. Thank you very much.
Well, I mean, we are working for much more than what's going on right now. We have a great team. We are working to pursue our commitment toward the fight against climate change, for the reconciliation with Indigenous communities, for investment in the infrastructure. And I think this is really what motivates our caucus right now. And whatever decision will be taken by the Prime Minister and or the whip, I will live with it, and I'm really a team player. And my concentration, my mandate right now is to focus on agriculture and agri-food, and I'm very proud of that, and I know that I have a great team around me, and I will be there with the Prime Minister and our team to pursue our overarching mandate. Alors, je suis convaincue que notre caucus.
I'm convinced that our caucus is really focused on the major issues such as fighting climate change, reconciliation with Indigenous communities, investments in infrastructure. Those are the major issues we're looking at, and our caucus is really focused on realizing our mission and these important issues. So whether Ms. Wilson-Raybould is in caucus or not, we are really more focused on carrying out our mission, and these are major issues that take years to come to terms with, and that's what we're working on right now.
Well, thank you for that question, Kitty. I'll first begin by thanking the people of Peterborough-Kawartha, who have afforded me a seat in the Parliament and the Prime Minister for his continued confidence. I agree with colleagues. It is ultimately the Prime Minister's decision.
Are you comfortable, are all three of you, again, question to all three of you, are all three of you comfortable with her remaining in caucus, even though she won't affirm that she has confidence in the Prime Minister?
And I think the Prime Minister said it best, Katie, that he's going to take the time to reflect on that, and I trust that judgment.
Other ministers to respond as well.
Okay. Are you guys having fun with this? All of us? How about we all go?
Next question.
Le portfolio du développement international.
The international development portfolio was something you really enjoyed. Now you're going to be dealing with different issues. Now, is there any kind of disappointment you're feeling today? And maybe this move could be considered to be a demotion? Well, to answer your first question, there's no real disappointment. Certainly I feel somewhat torn because the world of international development is one where people are in it because of their vocation, and you travel to very extreme situations, and you also have close connections with your partners. So that's why I feel somewhat torn. But it's not really disappointment. I'm very excited about the new department. Agriculture and agri-food is a very important department with huge responsibilities. So I see this with a great deal of enthusiasm. Now, on another topic that has nothing to do with your new or old portfolios, with respect to SNC, yesterday Ms. Qualtrough said that there could still be a DPA. Do you think this is advisable as a minister from Quebec? Well, I think the government has made a number of commitments, and particularly the creation and protection of jobs. This is extremely important, and we have to look at everything that we can do to attain those objectives. Obviously, while still abiding by laws, looking at and respecting our budget. So we have to look at everything we can do, obviously, within the legislative and budgetary framework that's in place.
For Minister Mcauley. Minister, when you were the Minister of Agriculture in your previous role, you were tasked with dealing with supply management, which was one of the most controversial issues of the NAFTA agreement. Did you feel or receive any pressure from the Prime Minister's office to make sure that supply management was dealt with in the NAFTA agreement?
Thank you very much. I wish they'd tell me more, really. As far as I'm concerned, you need to work collaboratively, whatever you're dealing with. And of course, being a farmer myself and having been a supply management sector myself, I fully understand the importance of supply management. No, I received absolutely no pressure. And I also want to say that I'm pleased to see it going into such capable hands. That is so important for the agricultural sector. Marie-Claude will make an excellent job of handling agriculture. Thank you very much.
My follow-up is for Minister Bibeau. Minister Bibeau is a Quebec MP. You must have heard that in Quebec City, many of the parties there are calling for a deferred prosecution agreement. Would that be something that you'd like to see for SNC-Lavalin?
As I said in French earlier, actually, I think one of the important commitment of our government is to create jobs, and actually we have contributed to making an environment for the Canadians to create jobs, and since 2015 we're talking about more than 900,000 new jobs. So this is very important. Obviously protecting jobs is also important, and I think we have the responsibility to look in our toolkits to see how we can always do better and for creating jobs and protecting jobs, always within our legal and budget framework.
Teresa Wright, Canadian Press. My question is for Minister Mcauley. There were concerns that were raised about the Veterans Affairs portfolio being seen as a demotion. First of all, I'd like for you to answer whether you see it that way, and how will you address those concerns to veterans and also to the employees at the headquarters in Charlottetown?
Well, of course, I will be going to the department very, very shortly, and to have the honor to represent the people who preserve peace and democracy for us worldwide. That's a long piece from a demotion. It's truly an honor for me, and I've always said being associated with Veterans Affairs 22 years ago was such an honor and a privilege, because we all have to realize exactly what these people do. These people put their lives on the line just so that you and I can stand here and talk, debate, or give news and feel free. That is why I am so extremely proud and thank the Prime Minister for asking me to fulfill this task. And I can say to veterans, I will do my very best to represent you because that's exactly what you deserve. Thank you.
I would also like to ask a follow-up to you and to all three of you. Given the short amount of time between now and the election, are you concerned about, being able to do anything meaningful in your portfolios and that perhaps you're just really placeholders until the election?
Well, of course, nothing stops. The fact is things keep rolling. As Minister, you're responsible for your department at the Cabinet table. I would, if there's adjustments to be made, and there normally is, there are things that have to be probably changed, but it's important to realize that quite a number of things have changed since we became government. And anything I can do to add to that, I will. But I have to be well briefed again. It's a long time since I was there. But again, I look forward to it so very much to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question, Teresa. And as Minister Mcauley just said, the work continues. And I have the opportunity to pick up where Minister Bibeau has left off. She's done a tremendous amount of work. She has not only introduced a feminist international development policy, but she's done something really significant, which is build and strengthen relationships all around the world. I'm going to continue to do that, continue to ensure that women are at the heart of the work that we do, because when women do well, whether it's abroad or here in Canada, their families do better and everyone benefits. And all roads on that particular file lead to Women Deliver. The largest gathering of women, they're coming to Vancouver. Canada's hosting them. And in this really important moment in time when there is an important conversation happening about gender equality, Canada has the opportunity to continue to lead, to build on momentum, and to make sure that peace is more enduring abroad, that women are included in addressing challenges like climate change, and that we lift more women out of poverty abroad, just like we've lifted 825,000 Canadians out of poverty here in Canada 3 years ahead of schedule. I'm very much looking forward to that work.
What else to add in the sense that, we have been working together since the beginning, and as much as Mariam was following up on the Feminist International Assistance Policy, I was following up on the supply management issues as well. So I think we are already in the same spirit, and we will continue the good work that has been undertaken, but obviously putting our personal input into it, and I really look forward to get all these briefings and discussions with my new team. Alors évidemment que de continuer.
So obviously, taking on a new department less than a year away from an election raises some questions, but we've been working together closely right from the beginning. Mariam Monsef was following the development of international development policy, and I was certainly looking very closely at supply management during the free trade negotiations. So we were well aligned, but of course, when a minister takes on a new mandate, we have to put our own personal input in there. Ms. Bibeau, on SNC, you said that DPAs are a tool in the toolkit. Do you believe it's a good tool? Well, deferred prosecution agreements are governed by legislation that provide for consultation and parliamentary review. So I do think it's good legislation to have. We decided to pass it. But now we also have to, I'm not a legal expert, but I do believe that what is really important in this context is to consider all the tools we have at our disposal in order to create and protect jobs in Quebec and all across Canada. And I think it's important to remember as well that a deferred prosecution agreement is not a free ride. It's a way to provide for justice, but to punish people differently in terms of any individuals who are responsible and the corporation, but while at the same time protecting innocent parties such as employees, retirees, partners, and suppliers. When you include the suppliers in the equation, we're talking about as many as 100,000 people across Canada who are affected. So I do think we have to look at all the options and, of course, within the proper legal framework and the budget. There's quite a controversy right now. Do you think you will have to pay a political price if you move forward with negotiations with SNC? Well, for me, I think we have to look at all the options while still respecting the legislative framework. Thank you.
La dernière question.
Kevin Gallagher with CTV News. This is a question for all three, if I may. Of course, with the resignation of Jody Wilson-Raybould from Cabinet, the ongoing attention that that particular scandal is receiving, have any of you found it difficult to focus on your tasks, and what's the morale like for the remaining cabinet members as we approach an election?
I think actually it's a moment to work even closer together and to focus on what is really important to us. Really important to us, I mean fighting against poverty. And I'm sure you've seen the Statistic Canada report. We have brought more than 800,000 people out of poverty. We have to fight against climate change. We have to invest in infrastructure. So it's really the time for us to work closer together and to focus on our real major challenges and objectives.
Thank you very much. No, I have no problem following the agenda that we have to follow. What we said we were going to do is bring more people into the middle class. That's what we're doing. Reduce poverty. That's what we're doing. That's what the agenda is, to create jobs and opportunity for people in this country. My specific job at the cabinet table is to represent the veterans of this country, and I look forward to doing that. And I see no problem with morale. We got a job to do, and we're doing it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin, for your question. There are systems in place in Canadian democracy to ensure that the questions that are before us on this matter are addressed appropriately, and I have full trust and confidence in those institutions and in those systems. What I'm here to do is to make sure that Canadian kids don't go hungry to bed. What I'm here to do is to make sure that when women seek supports for having experienced violence, that help is there for them, that we grow the economy by investing in women and girls, that we advance gender equality abroad and here at home, because when women do well domestically or around the world, there's more peace, there's more prosperity, and there's more security. And we have a plan. It's easy to stay focused on the plan because it's working. Canadians are creating over 800,000 jobs. We have the lowest unemployment rate that we've had in over 40 years. 825,000 Canadians are no longer living in poverty, and that is why we're here, and that's what Canadians, including the people in my community in Peterborough-Kawartha, expect us to stay focused on. So thank you for being here today. I see a lot of people not wearing gloves. Thanks for your patience, and we'll see you again soon.
I was going to ask.
We were just watching the three newest, I guess, ministers or shuffled ministers in the Justin Trudeau cabinet speak to reporters. I'm Vassy Kapelos. You're watching a special edition of Power in Politics. That was Minister Monsef, Minister Mcauley, and Minister Bibeau. Minister Bibeau has moved over to the portfolio of Agriculture, taking over for Lawrence Mcauley. Lawrence Mcauley moves over to Veterans Affairs, taking over for Harjit Sajjan, who was there only in the interim because, of course, that is the portfolio vacated by Jody Wilson-Raybould when she resigned. And Mariam Monsef adds to her portfolio, which is currently gender equality, and she adds the international development portion of that to what she's covering. I am here with our special power panel, I guess we'll call it, iPolitics Marie-Claude Walsh, Evan Dyer of CBC, and our parliamentary bureau chief, our boss, Rob Rousseau, here with us as well.
No pressure.
Okay, so let's pick up. We just heard all three of them address their cabinet shuffle. Okay, that's interesting, but especially the SNC issue. Two things that stuck out for me. They were all asked, of course, course, if they believe that, by our colleague Katie Simpson, if Jody Wilson-Raybould should remain in cabinet, even though she has not expressed confidence in the Prime Minister. And Marie-Claude Bibeau was specifically asked Rob about SNC and about the DPA. Let's go over what she said.
I found that the most interesting part of the scrum, to tell you the truth. The other two new ministers sprinted away, I would say, from the grenade that was lobbed at them when the SNC issue came up. Marie-Claude Bibeau not only threw herself on the grenade, she tried to pull the pin out. She was asked about deferred prosecution agreements. This would, in effect, allow for a plea bargaining that would see SNC found guilty and pay some sort of fine and not have to face the prospect of a decade-long ban from federal contracts in Canada. And she defended it. She actually made a stout defense, called it a legitimate tool in the toolbox. It said it was not a free ride. It was a way to protect innocent employees, pensioners, and suppliers. So that was a very stout defense, and it suggests that she, at the cabinet table, is going to be at least making a case for this, and this issue is not dead. It may still be alive, a DPA for SNC-Lavalin.
And that's so interesting, Evan, because we had been talking about what are the optics of continuing to pursue a line where the AG does intervene and overrules what the Director of Public Prosecution has already decided.
Right. I mean, you know, the ethics are, when she says that the DPAs are a legitimate tool in the toolkit, there is some argument to be made that they are a legitimate tool in the sense that it's a principle of our justice system that we don't punish the innocent, right? And you could apply the same argument to the LAV deal. You know, the LAV deal with Saudi Arabia, many people have pointed out, probably would not hold up to a legal test of whether those arms sales are legitimate, but at the same time, we have to think of all the workers in London. Here too, maybe 100,000 people involved with SNC when we count employees, suppliers, and contractors and so on, who haven't done anything wrong. So there is an argument to be made there. I do think, though, you know, she, of course, is speaking as a Quebec MP and minister, very aware of the debate about those jobs in Quebec. But I think that it's the conventional wisdom that people in Quebec will only care about the jobs and not care about the other elements of this is not accurate. I was struck, actually, what Maxime Bernier said yesterday when our colleague Julie Van Dusen caught up with him. And she asked, how is this playing in Quebec? And he said, well, look, we're not aliens. We don't like this either. And that's very true. And if anything, Quebecers are particularly aggrieved about the fact that these kinds of scandals always seem to revolve around Quebec, and they have as little or less patience with them at this point than other people in Canada.
We had former Provincial Minister David Ertel on the Power Panel last night, and he pointed out that the headlines, though there has been a lot of coverage of the headlines pro-SNC and pro, that yesterday there was a marked difference, that in fact there were, Jody Wilson-Raybould's picture was on the front page, and the interference aspect of this, or the inappropriate angle of it, was actually front and center, which is kind of interesting. Final thoughts from you, Marie?
I don't know what message track they use to land where Marie-Claude Bibeau was trying to defend the DPA. I'm not sure how they can explain that to Canadians, and I guess that's what we'll wait and see. But right now, I don't see how they get there and still have that credibility.
I'm glad that you raised that question because I'm about to ask Marie-Claude Bibeau herself. So I will thank all three of you so much for joining us today. Thanks to Rob Russo, Evan Dyer, and Marika Walsh. Appreciate your insight and spending your time with us this morning. As I mentioned, Marie-Claude Bibeau is the new Minister of Agriculture, and she joins us now from Rideau Hall. Hi, Minister. Thank you so much for being with us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I want to start off by picking up on something you said to reporters a few moments ago, and that is, I want to ask you whether or not you believe the DPA is the appropriate tool to use in the SNC-Lavalin matter.
Well, I don't come from the legal environment, but the DPA is definitely one tool we have in our toolbox, and I think it is the responsibility of a government to create jobs, or at least to create the environment for Canadians to create jobs and to protect the jobs we can protect. And we have to take into consideration all the tools we have available. We are talking a lot about the DPA right now. And I think it's important to remember or to remind the people who are listening that it's not a free ride for any type of business who could benefit from that. We really want to bring the people, the individuals who are guilty of having done a financial crime to face justice. We want the company to pay for that crime, but we want to protect the innocent people. I mean, the thousands of employees. And we're not only talking about employees in Quebec. Actually, there are more employees outside of Quebec than inside of Quebec when we think about Bombardier, about SNC, I'm sorry. And we also have to take into consideration all the retired people who might eventually, if SNC is go bankrupt, that they could lose their retirement plan. And if we think about all the subcontractors, we are talking about 100,000 people concerned by this. So I think we have the responsibility to look at every tools we have within the legal and the financial framework.
Minister, do you know for a fact that if they were not to receive a DPA, that those jobs, all those positions that you just mentioned, would be lost? Does your government have any evidence for Canadians that that would actually be the case?
Well, I can't confirm, but we can see already on the market that SNC is facing huge challenges. But honestly, well, I'm not the minister, a minister who is close to this situation, and I'm not a lawyer either by training. But from what I see, the DPA is definitely one important tool that we have to consider. And if we go forward, it's because it will be because it's legal, and SNC deserve to benefit from it. And when I say benefit, once again, it's to protect the innocent people, and we want to see the criminals face justice.
I understand the point that you're making and the argument you're making, but what's missing from my perspective is evidence that that will be the case. Your government is saying you're standing up for jobs, you're protecting jobs, you don't want to see innocent people lose their jobs. Is there any evidence that if, and I take the concern that it could happen, but do we know for sure that those jobs would be lost, that SNC would face financial ruin and move from Canada if they were not to receive a DPA? Like, where is the proof?
Well, if they lose the opportunity to bid on federal contracts, that would definitely be a significant loss for them, for their business.
Does it matter to you that the Director of Public Prosecution has made a decision not to proceed in that direction? I mean, that's an independent decision that was made. What does your government, why does your government feel that decision should not stand alone?
Well, it is within the legal framework or within the law for the DPA that the Attorney General has the capacity in a complete legal way to give direction or to change this decision, as long as it is done according to a very transparent process with the Gazette. So I think since it has been, it is written, that possibility is written within the law, I think we must consider doing so.
Do you think,
but
do you understand?
I cannot...
Do you understand how unprecedented it would be for the AG to do so on a specific prosecution? According to Jody Wilson-Raybould, that's never happened before.
Well, actually, it's a very new law, so there's not a lot of history around it in Canada.
Do you think that, given the fact that Jody Wilson-Raybould has said that she does not have, or sorry, she has not answered the question of whether or not she has confidence in the Prime Minister, do you want her to stay in caucus?
Well, I think within the caucus right now, what is important to us is to stand together and to very focus on our objectives at a higher level. We want to create jobs. We want to protect the environment. We want to continue with the reconciliation process with the Indigenous communities. All these things, and we want to get people out of poverty, and I'm sure you've seen the statistics, and we're very proud that our plan is working and that we got more than 800,000 people out. So we really take this moment to stand together and to focus on our real objectives, and we don't want to be distracted.
With respect, Minister, that doesn't answer the question. Do you want her to remain in caucus?
I mean, I don't put I will live with her in the caucus, or she could leave the caucus. Well, I don't focus on that.
Okay, Minister, I want to ask you one question about your new portfolio, and I do realize that you just took it over, but there are a lot of dairy farmers waiting to find out how much they'll be compensated for the recent trade agreements that your government has signed on to and when they will receive that compensation. Can you offer us any answers on that?
Well, the committee who is working on the subject, because actually there are more committees, but I know that one has already submitted its report and it's being analyzed. So I really look forward to see what is in this report, and I will have further discussions, obviously, with the Minister of Finance and with my department to understand better and to see what is possible. And their recommendations, I know that are related to the three most recent free trade agreement with 3 different regions of the world, including the U.S.
Do you anticipate before the budget you will have news for dairy farmers in Quebec and elsewhere who are waiting again to find out if and when and how much they'll be compensated?
Well, I follow the file since the beginning because I come from a rural riding, a dairy riding, but I haven't been into these conversations directly, so I really look forward to see the recommendations that are in the report.
Okay, Minister, thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate it, and congratulations on your new portfolio.
Thank you.
That was Marie-Claude Bibeau. She is the new Minister of Agriculture. She just participated in a swearing-in ceremony at Rideau Hall. She's taking over the portfolio from Lawrence Mcauley, who is, of course, a longtime MP from PEI. I believe he's won 9 straight elections, and he'll be running for another one. He moves over to the portfolio of Veterans Affairs, which was recently vacated by Jody Wilson-Raybould, the former Attorney General. Jody Wilson-Raybould, of course, is the backdrop to this entire cabinet shuffle. 3 ministers were involved. It was a mini cabinet shuffle, but it comes on the heels of some explosive testimony from Wilson-Raybould this week. We have all been glued to that testimony and the testimony that preceded it from Clerk of the Privy Council, Michael Warnock. In that testimony, she corroborated allegations that first came to light in the Globe and Mail, and she said that she was inappropriately pressured. We, of course, will be watching for opposition reaction to this cabinet shuffle throughout the afternoon. We'll bring it to you live on News Network, and we'll have more on this story throughout Power and Politics. Those are the latest developments in the ongoing and escalating SNC-Lavalin controversy. As I mentioned, Power and Politics will be back at 5 o'clock Eastern. For all the latest, I'm Vassy Kapelos. There's a lot more coming up on CBC News Network right after this with Suhana Marchand. Stay with us and have a great day.